It is my privilege, not just pleasure, to welcome a very distinguished, stellar panel. And my colleague Rajshekar has really put this together on a very important topic that just seems inevitable or business as usual, but really it's fundamental to India's energy transition story, which is we have ambitions, plans, activities towards very high renewables in the country. What are the frameworks, the systems to enable that? Are we there or are we getting there yet? So I will not introduce our panelists. My colleague will do that, but I'm notionally I'm saying thank you for inviting me to join, and maybe not as a panelist, so that way I can get to listen to all of our experts who span grid operations, regulatory, academic space, globally recognized in all of these. So I will not actually take up any more thunder from my colleague Rajshekar, who will just set the tone with a few questions and moderate the event. Thank you, Rajshekar, and thank you, everyone.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. Firstly, to set the context, we have achieved enormous growth over the few years, like particularly the last decade, and reached almost 150 gigawatts of renewable energy. And now we are aiming for a bigger thing, that is 450 gigawatts by 2032. Now, aiming to have that kind of big number, we have to understand what happens if it is achieved. Assuming that we have achieved 450 gigawatts, but the thing is that even if you achieve that mark, during certain time blocks in a day, you would be having surplus RE, and during certain time blocks, you would be having deficit, because at high insolation points, you will be having high RE. Not only that, you have a problem of having thermal minimum with the thermal generation. So you'll end up having some curtailment in RE. But the question arises that when you're having a deficit in the evenings, so can you use the energy that you are curtailing in the mornings to energize some battery source or pump storage, and then use it in the evening when you actually need it? So what kind of cost-effective options that you have? So know how economic it is to use that kind of resource. And then comes the question of market operation, system operation. In the normal system, like a very certain resources like thermal or hydro, the system operation is a different thing. But when the layers of uncertainty and variability is thrown in by RE, the entire system operation changes its course, even market operation. And then the question comes, what kind of price signals the system is throwing, and whether that kind of price signals are actually facilitating the continuity of investments that are happening. So a lot more complex questions. We have a distinguished panel with us today to deliberate on some of these questions and give their insights on this. So let me, before I start asking the panelists to share their thoughts, let me introduce the panelists. We have Dr. Sushant K. Chatterjee. He is presently Chief Regulatory Affairs with the Central Electricity Regulatory Commission. And he has long experience of dealing with power sector reforms, especially regulatory reforms, since its inception in 1998. And he's played a pioneering role in introducing the Electricity Act 2003, Renewable Energy Certificate Mechanism, Security Constrained Economic Dispatch, SCED, we shortly call it, and real-time market-based ancillary services, etc. He's a Fulbright scholar and has been a postdoctoral research fellow at Harvard Kennedy School, US, and he holds a PhD in management, MBA in finance, and master's in economics. He has carried out research projects and NREL and London School of Economics. And he got 3 books to his credit as a co-author. Now, let me introduce Shri Sushil Kumar Soni. He's a former founder, CEO of POSOCO, now we call it Grid India. And he has first-hand 4 decades of experience of power sector operation of various regional grids in India, and now have worked passionately towards integration of the grids. Now we have only single grid, national grid. And he specializes in power system operation, planning, commercial settlement, restoration, and entire gamut of power pooling and governance. And let me introduce Dr. Kaveri, and she is an assistant professor with the School of Public Policy, IIT Delhi. And she is focused on transition of energy and related sectors in context of climate change under deep uncertainty. And Prior to joining IIT Delhi, she worked as a postdoctoral fellow at Harvard Kennedy School, and she received her doctoral degree from Delft University of Technology in Netherlands. And also, she worked in capacity market studies in Europe and on the deployment of solar energy in India. And now, let me introduce Dr. Rahul Tongia. He's a senior fellow with CSEP in Delhi, and so he's also a non-resident fellow at Brookings Institution and also adjunct professor at Carnegie Mellon University. So with that, let me start the proceedings by asking certain critical questions. So let me start with Dr. Chatterjee. Sir, given the layers of uncertainty and variability, there are quite a few challenges in policy formulation and also designing the regulatory interventions and frameworks. So, what is your opinion on that particular aspect of challenges in terms of policy and regulation?
Very general question.
And so let me add on to that. The supply demand issues are very normal in any kind of business, but with these kind of variabilities are throwing a lot of different challenges for you in designing the market frameworks. So how do you?
Yeah. Good afternoon to all of you, and thanks to CSEP, Rahul and Rajshekhar, to be specific, for inviting me for this panel discussion. It's always a pleasure to be here. Earlier also, I've had the occasion when Daljit had called and invited us, and pleasure to be in this kind of a gathering where you have people, although small number, at least in terms of physical presence, but I think each one of you understands the subject more than we do. And always a pleasure to share thoughts on that. But now coming on to the challenges, policy and regulatory challenges, but let me set the context. You have, Rajshekhar, already set the context in terms of the energy transition goals that India has, and the challenges that we have in terms of grid management as well as the market design. It's a it's a subject which is still evolving, and I don't know whether we have a very clear answer to the fundamental question that you have put as your tagline for the panel discussion today. Are the markets ready for the kind of energy transition goals that we have? At least at my level, I don't have a very clear answer to this question, because we are still struggling with the challenges and studying to understand various market models and market designs elsewhere in the world. And in course of our research, we find that almost all geographies in the world are still grappling with this fundamental question of what should be the right kind of market design in the context of energy transition, and more so in the context of high penetration of the variable renewable energy, VRE, especially wind and solar. So that's a fundamental question which is still being debated, and so many discussion papers. You have different market models. One is the US market design, which is a centralized dispatch model, and the other one is the Europe, where you don't have a centralized dispatch model per se. Until 1 hour before the gate closure, you have full freedom for the buyers and the sellers to enter into any kind of a bilateral contract, and come the gate closure, the system operator takes over, and he runs both the energy market and the ancillary. India's is closer to European model, and but then Europe also, especially UK, also has been exploring major change in terms of the market design that they have, and that too in the context of the large-scale integration of renewable. They have proposed what they call REMA, new reforms on market design, where if you have a look at that proposal that they have floated, which is, I mean, they are also in a way hinting towards a market model which is closer to the US market model, where they are talking in terms of the locational marginal pricing, because the physical attributes and the financial attributes, can you segregate the two? In the context of India, this is very, really very relevant, because when we talk about the market design in India, generally, I mean, we talk only in terms of the energy only market of the power exchange or the traders market, but largely, and when at the policy level, we talk in terms of the market design, we talk in terms of, increasing the depth of this market. I mean, how do we increase the depth? The whole concept of the market-based economic dispatch, which
Can you just share for the audience how little markets are actually doing relatively right now? I mean, you said increase the depth, but right now markets are not very deep.
No, that's exactly what I'm saying, that ours is 7% in terms of the energy power exchange market. If we talk of power market, I mean, this is what we mean by power market. The power exchange market today, which is akin to your centralized market, not in terms of the physical attributes that the US has, it's only about 7% today. Now, one of the goals is to increase the depth of this market, and there are different targets, I mean, going up to 25% tariff policy and all that. But fundamental question that I am posing, even to myself, to ourselves as policymakers and regulators, as to whether you want to increase the energy only market and make it from 7% to 25% and 30%. And would that be good enough for the market, or are you thinking in terms of the wholesale market in its entirety, where you talk in terms of both the capacity markets as well as the energy market? And not only that, in the context of the high penetration of renewable, you also have to talk more in terms of the market for your ancillary services, market for your flexibility. So we should not, at least I mean, whenever we talk in terms of the depth of the market, it's not enough to talk in terms of increasing the depth of this energy market from 7% to 25%, 20% or 30%. It's a complete new paradigm that you need to think of, is what is coming out in course of our discourses, in course of our of the challenges that we are facing. Because your question was around the challenges. I don't think the challenges are something which are new to any of the participants today. I mean, our markets are not today ready for handling the kind of ramping requirements and for meeting the peakiest of the peak, which is what is becoming a reality. Traditionally, the whole market design, including the contracting is an important component of the market design. The whole contracting and the scheduling, dispatch, everything was designed with the base load, coal-based generating stations in mind. Now, we never contracted separately to, we had never imagined that we would need such a high ramping requirement. We had not thought in terms of what we are talking, in terms of duck curve and what Mr. Suni calls giraffe curve. And also, the peakiest of the peak. And I mean, we have several examples, I mean, which, we can give visual presentation would have been good. But then, on 30th of May, we witnessed in India the highest peak demand so far, which is 250 gigawatt. And on that day, about 42 gigawatt was your solar. And suddenly in the evening, this entire 42 gigawatt became zero. It was very difficult for us to manage the system at that time. Of course, the peak demand in the evening was about 234 gigawatt, but then still you had a huge gap because 42 gigawatt went off. As against that, the overall demand decreased only by about 16 odd gigawatt. So you had to rely on your hydro, which was there. But we also have, under the gunpoint, there is a Section 11 direction, which the government of India keeps issuing every crunch period. And we make these gas-based generating stations run despite their litigations and all that. They are told that you have to generate during this crunch period. And so despite that, we had tough, and rather on a couple of days before 30th May, you have had a peak, which is non-solar peak. In fact, off late, what is getting critical and the challenge that you're talking about is the non-solar peak. Non-solar peak management becomes trickier because at that time, if you are actually witnessing very high peak during the evening time, you really get into trouble. So what are the resources which you need? And whether those resources can come through your energy market price signals. These are the questions which, at least as policymakers and regulators, we are trying to find an answer to. And as I said right at the inception, we don't have a very clear answer to that as to whether the energy market price signals can incentivize. That's a big debate internationally, and almost every day and day out, either international conferences, you would find these discussions. There is one school of thought, possibly led by Bill Hogan, who says that energy only market is good enough. Capacity market would end you up with a huge cost of capacity charge, which you may find difficult to bear at a later date. So let the energy market give a price signal and the capacities will come on their own. There is a contrast that no, I mean, energy only market cannot, and especially with the phenomena of the negative pricing, it's very difficult to expect the capacities to come on their own. And then secondly, what kind of capacities do you need? Like, as I said, we are, even as of now, the focus is largely from the supply side. We are not really talking in terms of the demand response as much as we should have, like what we call NIGA. So now, what you need, that for that peakiest of the peak, you may not need to contract a generation capacity and keep paying for the capacity charge all through that. So there is a whole, and then whether, as I said, whether these capacities will come on their own once you have created the right kind of market design, or do you need a proper resource adequacy framework for the load serving entities to contract these capacities on a longer time horizon for them to become more sustainable. These are some of the questions from my side, which we are trying to find an answer to, and we'll be happy to hear other panelists and interventions from the audience on some of these questions. And I think I'll stop here and chip in as we go.
Thank you so much, sir, for taking us through complex areas which are really being looked at by the policymakers, which includes both the between supply side and demand side, and the resource adequacies, and as well as demand side response, etc., which are yet to be seen completely. And now may I ask Suni sir to explain some of the challenges that system operator usually faces in handling the complete ramping up, ramping down problems, and you have a stable, thermal minimum that is required to be adhered to, and also how exactly the planning and projections and handling real-time variabilities are important, because still we are yet to achieve a good amount of predictability in terms of renewables. So could you please throw some light on that, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Rajsekhar. Thank you, CSEP. I must completely pronounce it, Center for Social and Economic Progress. Thanks, my co-panelist, Kaveri ma'am and Dr. Chatterjee, and of course, Rahul Sanghya sir. And after Dr. Chatterjee has given the full view, it becomes very challenging because operators only take directions from the regulators. However, when it comes to an opportunity, operators never miss. We will very boldly say what we really face, and we get similar support from public at large. So I'm very grateful that such an exalted audience is there. So the topic itself, India's ambitious green transition, colon, our electricity market ready, question mark. So the first part, there is no doubt. India's ambitious green energy transition, it's much beyond all of us, which is there. We are all running with that light at the hill. Fine. Are electricity markets ready? Or should I paraphrase and said, are grids ready? Are consumers ready? So market should be much latter is what comes to my mind. First thing, market can be readied, market can be designed. That's a different aspect. But first, the physical system. That's how I would like to put it first. The second was, Chatterjee has given a very overview of the entire regulatory issues. I'll come down to very rustic ground level reality and specifically on India's ambitious green transition. And I'll gather courage to say where we are missing and how we can overcome this. I don't want to appear cynical, but little less than that, but yes, very close to that. So the issue is, when you plan for gigawatts and gigawatts of RE, or you have ambition for that, you got to create all other infrastructure also of that giga scales. Entire ecosystem has to be built. So vision and mission without skills and resources is a false start, or you will have hiccups. So couple of things which immediately comes to my mind, and I just jotted down. Number one, we must build institutions. And building institution is tough. Believe me, and particularly in India, it takes a lifetime to build a good institution. And without institution, neither economics will work, nor engineers can work, nor lawyers can work, nobody can work. We need good institutions. And that's really lacking. Even for grid operation, the POSOCO, the Grid India, the amount of pains you go through, I think I should write something about it. And states are still nowhere near that. So without these institutions, you will have real hurdles, number one. Number two comes to the resources. Let's say that light on the hill is there, 540 gigawatt, decarbonization goals, all those things, fine. We have to run with that. Human resources. While the targets of gigawatts and gigawatts are increasing, human resources are dwindling. And again, right from ministry to the regulatory commission to the system operation to everywhere. There's something missing in my view. Even if all the automations are put in place, even if the best of the people are put in place, you need bench strength. You will have attrition. All the good boys and girls whom I trained are now increasing GDP elsewhere in the world. That's it. That will happen. We got to be prepared for it. But we need, and we have strength. So manpower, of course, I must admit, CRC has been very liberal. Whenever I have gone to CRC and said, I need this, they said, please go ahead, but do something. But that's not the case with all other setup. Even for regulator himself, Ministry is not very liberal. So whenever you put a target, put associated conditions also to be fulfilled, and states are in real trouble. So that's the second point I wanted to make.
Sorry, maybe you could just share what you were mentioning, international comparison as a benchmark.
Yes. Well, I mean, it's such an exalted audience, everything. Look at the FARC and SARC manpower strength comparable. I'm feeling a little embarrassed with, Dr. Chatterjee being here. The amount of people they have. My only question to Dr. Chatterjee remains is, how many Dr. Chatterjees you have created and how many are there now? We can't have one or two. It doesn't work like that. FARC has hundreds of lawyers. It's a huge strength. So, and same thing everywhere. Same, you go to UK, any regulatory system. So that's the point. Now then comes skill set and tools. We can't depend on consultants only. We can't depend on all the softwares to be brought from outside. If you want 450 gigawatts of RE to be integrated. And it pains me of late, so I must share that तात्कालिक समस्या भी बोलना जरूरी होता है ना, नैसर्गिक तो है. तात्कालिक is, I have been to many states and gone into the details. None of them are still exposed to linear programming, simple optimization. They are still doing bucket filling. We got to raise their bar, improve the skill sets, and give them tools. Must spend on tools. Modeling and simulation is fundamental. We have many experts here. I can see them. I have been watching their whole life doing modeling and simulation. But modeling and simulation is not a one-time exercise. We get nice glossy reports. Many. They are like, you are giving me fish. Teach me fishing. I should be able to change any parameters and show it to you on the screen. That should be the capability minimum required, not only at the central, also at the state level. And it will take time. But ladies and gentlemen, that if we don't do, then we are not doing justice to this ambition. I talked about in-house capability. I'm a great believer of intrinsic capability. And I will take advice from everyone, no doubt about it. But intrinsic capability is a must. Let me come to some quick, otherwise it will be a rant. So let me switch over to other things. Physical systems. Grid has always been on crossroads. It will remain on crossroads ever. That's what my mentors have taught me. I recollect when railways came in eastern region, 12.5 megawatt will come as a spike and go as a spike. That's how the traction load is when they do notching. What a hostile load. When Nalco aluminum plant came, 600 megawatts when the ladle is shifted, and again 600 megawatt comes. All this we did in 80s and prepared the grid for accordingly. Society will keep changing, but we need to prepare ourselves for that. So whenever somebody frightens me with all this renewable, I said, don't intimidate me. We have handled aluminum plants, we have handled traction, we can handle this also. But we have a big list. There is no silver bullet, and we got to do everything. So the physical system has to be seen. So for doing this, I have a big toolkit. Okay. And a mechanic is known by the tools he carries. All kinds of fine toolkits. But I have one hammer in that toolkit. And I'm very proud of that hammer. And that hammer must be pakka. What is that? That is transmission. If India is proud of something, whether it is regulatory or policy or the design, is transmission. The whole world envies it. But economists ridicule us that you have overinvested. And my answer to them is, so be it. I am not at all defensive or apologetic about it. And I tell everybody that don't listen to anybody, build transmission. It's the least regret investment, and other countries are not able to make it. Don't create paralysis by analysis by doing financial transmission rights and incremental cost and all those things. Those are all nice, but please build transmission. FARC has recently said that you can't run the grid with this. Today, we are able to integrate so much of renewable because we have huge transmission system, near constraintless transmission, reaping the diversity of the order of double digit of the whole country, resources coming, going, all from forecasting to generation, uncertainties, that's handling that transmission. So I would say that first, we should have transmission, and we have a very good setup in transmission. Thanks to all visionary policymakers, regulators, and even the companies, the private sector, we have gone for a general network access, grid is considered as a common carrier and all that. So that's not the point. The point I'm saying is that for green ambitious target, we must have transmission. Just imagine if you had congestion the way it is in Europe or in US, our market would have gone for a 6. But today we get a single price throughout the country, and economists delight, and a market designer's dream that whole country is having single price. That's because transmission. That's because all these fundamentals are in place. Now, let me switch over to other topic. That is, I didn't mention all that, but you can have, and Dr. Chatterjee so nicely articulated that market design is an experiment going on everywhere. None of us know what exactly it should be. Energy only market and all kinds of things, centralized, decentralized, distributed. So DER, DRE, final nuances, all those things are there. And it will continue. It's a Lego set. It's a Lego set like a child. I keep putting, and then suddenly I find I wanted to make an elephant. Its tail is not there. It's looking a little more like a zebra. So, but again, I will recollect. But it's a Lego set. I'll put things. And very quick, we are agile that way. That way our country is agile. We do that very fast. But whatever may be the market design, when it comes to implementation, we are very poor. Compliance by culture is not there. I all the time request Dr. Chatterjee and through him the regulator, how many times you have fined? How am I worried about the code and regulation? Because I know I can go ahead. Look at the fines which FARC puts. Few $1 million every now and then. One complaint, committed penalty, khadak seller. Here there is nobody. So freestyle, people go. So enforcement of the code is a must. The other thing is, again, a rustic example is everybody is giving us recipe. Very nice recipes. Icing and this kind of that. Very nice. And then I am asked to that I have taught you all how the recipe is, how you prepare. Then when I go back to my kitchen, I find I have nothing. My stove is broken. I don't have whipper. I don't have a mixer. I don't have anything. So, my spouse keeps telling me that you only see power system. Please see the cookery classes. And I really got a lesson from that cookery class that, oh, this is what I got to do from power system. The teacher said to all those who were attending, please show me your video of your kitchen for 2 minutes. Then only I will give you the recipe. And that was the lesson which I brought here. And I am gathering courage to say that any state wants to do any market design, first show him the kitchen. How the tools are, how the people are, how do they work, what is their capability, whether at all they understand the long-term, short-term marginal cost or anything. So the point is, our kitchen is completely broken. And all such intelligentsia and learned people talking about market design pains me, because what will that person go back and do with such kind of thing? Please equip them. There should be a mission in this country to create ecosystem first. And then any recipe is fine with us. We'll change the recipe, what is there after all. So that is all. 3 more points and then I want to hand over before he comes. We are getting surprises every day. RE is being talked about, no doubt. But the kind of loads which are coming, we were never used to. For example, take case of data centers. We are always used to incremental load. Theme park load, suddenly 100 megawatt propping up, I had never seen, I cannot imagine. But now those are coming up. In India, data centers will surprise us. We cannot build all the other things. And data center want to remain green also. So how do we do that? And I have migrated from Delhi to Mumbai, and I saw in Mumbai all the planning and everything for data centers. It will be a more challenge than RE. Because RE is at least data center local, you need this. So the point I'm making is that we will have e-mobility is a challenge, but that's again not a very lumpy kind of a thing. You will have that. This cooking, that will also change the load curve because you can shift many things. But when we have electric cooking, I keep doing survey to all whom I meet that will you do cooking in the afternoon? Nobody will do cooking in the afternoon. Align it with sun? No. So cooking will give us surprise. That's the other thing. So I am trying to say that mobility, data centers, and gradually, if in the part of the decarbonization. So again, all these things along with renewables. So renewable is only one thing, but these are also some of the things which we have to think of. Last 2 points and then I close. Markets are good. I am a believer in market. Market, hidden hand of market, all of us know, wealth of nation and everything. But market, in my humble view, does not do 2 things or does very poorly 2 things. Number 1, it's not a substitute for planning. You need a body apparatus called government or a planner which we can plan. Market signals cannot tell me what I should keep in 2030. I have been reading all Hogan's, Bill Hogan, Mike Hogan, all kind of people, but I don't believe that planning can be substituted by market. Please, I'll see if I live that long to see whether it does that. So the second point I want to make is we are a union of state. And the strength lies in the states. So anything which we do, there is a forum of regulator, there is a forum of load dispatcher, but these institutions have to be, logarithmically raise their bar. Because states, the strength of the chain is by the weakest link, and our states are the weakest link as far as that is concerned. Last point is, even when market was not there, economists were there. And to cause economy in the power system is a century old. Ever since it started, equal criteria, equal lambda criteria, all kinds of slide rules, thumb rules, and calculations we have been doing. Power system people have been doing. Security constrained economic dispatch. Go to any country which has a market. The base engine is security constrained economic dispatch, which has been working for 30 years and which is simple. It's a solver, mixed integer linear programming, convex objective functions, all those things. Because that's how you get all the shadow price of your binding constraints. That's how you got technical interventions. In India, we have not gone for that security constrained economic dispatch. And that sets right everything. The moment you start running those kind of economic dispatch, every weakness will come out of your system. Because unless you put that. So, market, but get back to the fundamentals. put all these things in place, and then certainly we can take things forward. We have very capable people, we have very supportive regulatory commissions, policymakers, but we need to tell them that, sir, my kitchen is very bad, sir. Don't give me recipe. First set my kitchen right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for showing the criticality of readiness of the physical systems as well as institutions and the HR aspect as well. So may I ask Dr. Kaveri to throw some light on international experiences in terms of policy regulation, and also explain how India is different from the systems that are in place in US or Europe.
Right. So I've made extensive notes. Thanks for sharing these questions in advance. I think because I did my PhD in Europe, I was steeped in their kind of thinking, why market, and they had strong belief in markets, liberalization, and all of that. And when I started to work on India, I found that thinking very, very limited, because it does not, India is a very different context. Our kitchen looks very different. So the tools that Europe uses may not work. And understanding why took me a while. And so this is a nice question to answer. So what has the EU learned? They've, of course, always recognized that markets are essential. In fact, one of the key authors or key thinkers in Europe, David Newbery, he talks about how for renewables, what you need, an economist's dream, is to have extremely granular temporal signals, extremely granular spatial signals, and make sure that the external costs or the environmental impact, social costs are integrated in your prices. Why is that important? Why is it important to have a good price signal? And this is what both Dr. Suni and Dr. Chatterjee referred to. Because price signals enable two important decisions. One, efficient operation. They incentivize efficient operation. If there is a price, it allows a certain independent player, whether a generator or a demand center, to say, hey, I will buy now, but I will make a decision to sell now. And we don't have to go into, a central planner does not have to go into telling them exactly who should dispatch at what time. That is at least from an economist's point of view, right? And so you let the invisible hand work in operation. And as we have more uncertainty, you need to get that price signal more granular, is the thinking. The thing that prices are supposed to do, which I'm sure most of us know, is investment. Do they signal sufficient investment? And that's where, as both of them have explained, it's a lot of, there's still, the answer is not out there. I mean, it's more about, hey, can the prices do the job? Or maybe, will we not allocate resources efficiently if we don't rely on the energy markets entirely to price the capacity? What the EU learned, given that they have a fragmented system, is that in order to integrate renewables, markets strong interconnections, day-ahead markets, balancing markets, all of these can lead to savings of about 13 billion euros to 40 billion euros. Some studies have shown this. David Newbery talks about this. And just to give you a sense of the magnitude of this number, it's about 4 to 10% of Germany's budget. So markets and integration in the presence of renewables and uncertainty make a huge difference to reduced costs. Not only do they make a huge difference to reduce costs, they also make a huge difference to the curtailment. How much renewables is getting used, how much of it is getting, curtailed. So, markets they've recognized are important, and they went about pushing it, and it has helped renewable integration significantly. But they also realized that markets are reducing wholesale average prices, which means that it may, while the prices are somewhat volatile and they change on a short-term basis, on the long term, if the average reduces, it may not work very well as an investment signal. So they started worrying about security of supply issues. How do we ensure that there's sufficient investment? And the problems were real problems. So the UK in 2014, for instance, was not sure if it had enough capacity to meet its needs. So then they started talking about capacity mechanisms, remuneration mechanisms, and so on. And recently, as we all know, there's been a war in Ukraine, and that completely changed the story. So instead of a focus on granular market signals, they also strengthened their focus on stronger contracts. So that, because during the war, and in Europe, gas plays a strong role both in heating and in electricity, market prices became extremely volatile, and that they could not withstand. Politicians couldn't withstand, consumers couldn't withstand. It also affected investment naturally, right? If who's making windfall profits, and who can you make investment decisions based on such extremely volatile prices? So then they started. There's a recent European Commission directive which really pushes, and this is a massive change in their thinking. They push long-term contracts or contracts for differences in order to ensure more certainty both for the consumers and for the investors. And how they do this is not the same PPA structure that we have in India, where there is a certain amount of electricity that you require, capacity is mentioned in the contract. But they use a structure called contracts for differences, which allows the market price to be part of the equation. So what a contracts for differences is that the market price is the key signal that indicates how much the buyer has to pay the seller. However, there's an upper and lower limit. So if and that's called a strike price. So if the market price goes above that strike price, then the seller, the generator, has to pay back the consumer because that's out of the contract. And similarly at the other side as well. So the crucial thing about this is that dispatch decisions are still subject to market signals, while your investment decisions can be protected, right? And price volatility is also protected. So maybe that's something to learn for the Indian system. But quickly now transitioning to which of these lessons are useful for India and which of them aren't. I think, I was one of those people who said markets are extremely, this was, 4 or 5 years back, markets are essential for renewable integration. And then I realized, hey, okay, let me figure out what different people in India are saying about markets. So one of the, a DISCOM managing director told me, the mother of all problems is working capital. What this means is that in India, we have a massive cost recovery issue. DISCOMs are extremely under massive cash stress. And their payment cycles are range from maybe 6 months to 3 years or so. But if you want to dispatch and buy and sell from across anywhere to anywhere, you need to have trust that they will pay you soon, not in 6 months, right? Or in 3 years. And so what an MBED scheme requires is a massive working capital requirement for the DISCOMs, which cash-strapped DISCOMs do not have. And this is not a problem that exists in Europe or the US, in places where markets are implemented. So how do we address the working capital problem is a massive issue. And when I went through the comments that the CERC received in their proposal, I realized that there's also this, the power sector doesn't just play a the role of, hey, I'm giving the consumers power depending on, and I'll give it to you at the cheapest cost. The power sector also plays a developmental role. So, for example, the Mahagenco said in their response to the CERC that our generation plant is meant to create jobs. It's meant to improve development in our sector. We don't care about it being the cheapest way to generate. And so if an MBD scheme comes in and my slightly less efficient generator is not dispatched as often because there are more efficient generators elsewhere in some other state, and I have to shut down my generator, that's a problem for the states, because the states value their generation as a development feather, right? So that's another problem, which is, where cost is not the key objective. And so even though an MBED scheme could potentially lead to savings of up to 30% of variable costs across India, and reduce curtailment also by around 2030. These are, of course, all numbers, you can manipulate them, but these are some orders of magnitude. It could really, really help our cash-strapped discoms if we get into if we get into implementing MBEDs. However, we'll have to figure out how to ensure this working capital, how to ensure, and for that, the fundamental problem is cost recovery. And what Dr. Suni said, which is enhance the capacity of the different players to deal with uncertainty and the new tools, right? So if they have to use markets to a certain extent, they must be able to understand, how can I use markets best for my needs? What are the uncertainties with demand? What are the uncertainties with renewables that I have access to? What are the uncertainties? What are the long-term contracts that they need to be able to think about uncertainty, but most planning decisions are done in a heuristic way in India. So, I mean, in some of the states that I have spoken to, I can't say it's not a generic statement, but planning decisions, it's easy to take it heuristically. We have been contracting this much capacity from X and this much from the markets, and that's what we're going to do. The regulators also may be used to that because it's a sort of a safety net for them as well. Oh, are they worried that the market prices may increase and so on. So how to improve their capabilities of the different players to engage with uncertainty and these new tools is essential. And this is something maybe the center can help with to facilitate learnings between the states and so on. Yeah, I think maybe I'll stop here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for taking us through two important things on contracting issues, CFP, key takeaways, and on financial terms, the working capital issue. Both are very critical and still need to be addressed. So I would like to request Dr. Rahul to share his thoughts.
Well, as just someone listening and learning, two things sort of struck me. I think you've covered a lot of the bases. Are we ready for the changes that quote unquote efficient signaling will tell us? So just as an example, when we meet our high RE targets, we will have effectively zero prices in part of the day. And we're going to be struggling, and we're already seeing in the power exchange, which is not that deep, as you said, but it's still reflecting ceiling level prices. So one of the subtle discussions a lot of people have is, if you didn't have those ceilings on the power exchanges, where would prices have gone? The second thing is, we still do have PPAs. So do we modify them? How do we coexist PPAs with markets or not? And which brings to the last question, which is risk. I didn't hear that phrase yet, or maybe it's implicitly there, but how do we allocate, share, and signal for risk? Because right now, what we've seen has historically been, look at RE. Every wind and solar developer pretty much says, please give me a PPA. I'm going to cut down my risk. That's just passing on the risk downstream. These were just some things I would love to hear from the audience. I mean, as
So,
you take it as you take the next round.
I want to talk, I want to ask Dr. Chatterjee to answer the next question. The question is that just now Suni sir has explained how badly the state infrastructure is placed. And in terms of RE integration, there is quite a big challenge. But at the same time, the Central Electricity Regulatory Commission has played a critical role over the last few years, which is not very much seen in public. They have done a great hand-holding exercise. They took the states, they identified the states, and they had a seamless interaction with both POSOCO, at the time POSOCO it was called, and also the technical expertise they in-house they have, and they built excellent reports and infrastructure, and as well as the frameworks to handhold the whole thing to the states where exactly they require it. So I request Dr. Chatterjee to throw some light on that, sir, because it is not very much known in public.
Yeah, thanks. And revealing thoughts coming from the co-panelists. Yeah, state, as Mr. Suni rightly mentioned, I mean, we are a union of states, and but for the preparedness of the state, all that we are thinking in terms of huge renewable in the country might not really become a reality, because whether you talk in terms of contracting, it is the state utilities who have to contract in the kind of contracting structure that India has. It's not a centralized contracting. It's the load serving entities who have to engage in contract, and there are times when you don't have any bids coming up from any of the states. If bids don't come, renewables or any other capacity that you need in the country would not come. So states' role become important, and also in terms of the nice analogy that Mr. Suni gave about the kitchens. As I mean, we are a federal country, and even on the regulatory system, we have the same system. CRC does not have any hierarchical relationship between CRC and the state commission. So we cannot dictate terms, but we have nice fora called the Forum of Regulators, and as Mr. Suni also talked about, Forum of Load Dispatches. Through these fora, we try to engage with the states and try to do a lot of hand holding through model regulations, not only through model regulations, but also, you know, engaging with them, shaping their own state level regulations. In the context of the RE integration, of course, we have done a lot in terms of creating the desired regulatory framework, which is required at the state level. But currently, what we are still trying to engage with them, which is really critical in the context of RE integration or the market, the topic for discussion today, is what we call, you know, I mean, we are trying to sensitize them about the need for flexible resources. But for flexible resources, reserves requirement, you will not be able to sustain the kind of renewable target that you have. Now, first, in terms of the lessons on flexibility, you have no option other than flexing your own thermal fleet. So we have, as I said, I mean, we have been doing a lot in terms of regulatory interventions at the central level, but matching regulations or regulatory frameworks at the state level are still lacking. So one is the, you know, that minimum turndown level, or what we call technical minimum of the thermal fleet. We have already, we had quite some time back come to that level of 55% technical minimum. We are now talking in terms of 40%, but states, several states are still at 68 or 70%. With this requirement in your state grid code of 70% technical minimum, you will not be able to integrate the renewables. So we are engaging with them through some working groups and standing technical committees involving the state level technical. And the other point which often Mr. Suni has been very passionately talking in terms of the implementation of the security constrained economic dispatch. We have implemented that. It's not only a CED, you need a combination of SCUC and SCED, in my opinion, in Indian context and in the grid code that we have come up with in the recent past, at the central level. We have talked about the security constraint unit commitment as well as security constraint economic dispatch. These two are new creatures for the states altogether. We have implemented and successfully implemented SCED, and there is a need for implementation of SCED at the state level, where also we are trying to sensitize them. There are apprehensions, there are issues, but ultimately you need to have an integrated system. These are some of the things in terms of the RE integration also, but the most critical thing that we are trying to do with the states is, development of what we call the resource adequacy plan. So we at Forum of Regulators have come up with a model regulation of resource adequacy, a detailed report. Central Electricity Authority also has come up with a framework, and their website has RA framework frameworks for all states. Ultimately, at the end of the day, there are issues and discussions and around how the resource adequacy framework should be designed. But with renewables, high penetration of renewables in mind, you need to do scientific load forecasting. How do you do that? It's again a question. As I said, I'm throwing more questions than answers. So it's a debate. There are lots of views on how do you determine what you call the PRM, planning reserve margin. How do you factor in the LOLP, energy not served? There are different viewpoints floating around, but CA has come up with some definitions around that, and based on that they have come up with resource adequacy plan. This is one thing I think in the recent past which we have been able to successfully drive home to the states, that the kind of problem that you are facing today, either you have very high surpluses of the capacities during the daytime and acute shortage of supply during high peak demand. So either you have some stranding of capacities, or you don't have capacities enough to not to talk in terms of meeting your peak demand, but complete zero in terms of requirement for your reliability, because you need reserves apart from meeting your energy requirement. And that is what the whole story about the resource adequacy, and at least what we have been able to do through this engagement with the states. And in fact, we had formed a working group involving the state regulators themselves instead of sermoning from the CERC. Of course, it was led by technical members CERC, but then most of the progressive regulators were members of that. And through that, we had wide range of discussion. At least people at the state level now understand that there is a need for what they earlier, it used to be a business plan in terms of capex and investment planning. From there, we have, if you have a look at the multi-year tariff principles, they would actually ask the distribution companies to give them a business plan for the next 5 years. So we said that, no, this is not the way. You have to actually talk in terms of resource adequacy and what resource adequacy means. Then only you'll be able to manage your system. So this is the latest big achievement that we have had, where we have only been able to sensitize, not that we have been able to come up with the perfect resource adequacy plan in a format, but then the model regulation is there and state regulators are working on that. So these are some of the interventions which we are doing, which is really required. And I mean, it's a real need. I mean, without the states, you cannot do anything. At the center, I mean, people say that we are moving so fast, but at the states, they have to pick up. And good thing is that we are trying to handhold.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. This is not very much in public domain, that silently how CERC is handling the whole thing to take it forward to the states, because unless states are strengthened, you just can't expect the whole thing to unfold in its right fashion. So, Rahul, would you like?
I just had one reaction, and maybe if anyone would like to throw some light. The one phrase I didn't hear directly is time of day. So something as simple and well known that all power is not the same. We talked about that you need to signal for reliability, you need to signal for so many other attributes, your gas and hydro, which are right now being used just for their energy value. I mean, they serve other purposes, but they're not incentivized or compensated enough for that. Wouldn't something as simple as just how do we get it that all we have PPAs that don't have TOD in them? Is that a challenge? Do we do it just for future things? Because just something as simple as signaling at a wholesale level and eventually at a retail level for the consumers, that not all power is the same. You talked about no one wants to cook their dinner in the middle of the day. That's fine if that's the reality. Similarly, you cannot charge your EV in the day when you're out doing a delivery or at work. So any just thoughts on that one simple instrument that is common worldwide, but not yet done in India much?
Need to take?
No, no. I don't tread in difficult areas. These are all for you.
No.
But it's a very simple concept and recognized. I mean, CRC has been talking about it. So the question to you is, where is it being held up, since you have been asking for it in some ways?
No, first, I mean, you have so many questions in that question, but the first question was around the TOD or time of use. In fact, I in a way obliquely mentioned that when I talked about the peaking requirements. Your requirements during the daytime are so different from your requirements in the evening time. So it's not enough to have, see, we have the TOD tariff implemented in most of the states, especially for the industrial consumers. Very difficult to implement it for a domestic consumer politically. You may find it very difficult to implement. If you have very high prices, dynamic pricing, and in the evening, you go back and you can't switch on your air conditioner. In India, this will lead to a lot of social unrest is what the general understanding is. But so time of use tariff is something which is really required, but whether you can do it for domestic and some vulnerable consumer sectors is again a big question. But at the central level, even for the thermal generating stations, we have introduced time of day tariff. We have last control period only we introduced that. What we did was a time of use tariff, but only for on their capacity charge. But now there are demands that we are studying as to whether you can have the thermal generators energy charge also time sensitive, because what happens and this may be a reality and a necessity in the context of the intermittency of RE. Because what is happening, I'll just take 2 minutes, because this is something which is again very critical and a big challenge that Rajshekhar started with. Now in the new grid code, we have introduced a concept of supply obligation for the generating stations. Prior to the new grid code, the central generating companies had the comfort of going under reserve shutdown if all the beneficiaries put together who have their shares in that particular plant, if their total schedule is less than the technical minimum, they could pretty well go under the reserve shutdown, but continue to get the fixed cost from those guys. This was a big comfort, and people said that, these central generating companies are more like your national damads. So, what we sort of then revert, and then these DISCOMs, poor beneficiaries or distribution companies, had to fend for themselves in the market. So on the one hand, they would continue to give the fixed charge, but would also get very high cost because the plant has gone for all the 24 hours. So then we introduced the concept of supply obligation, that no, if you are recovering fixed cost from the DISCOMs, so anytime they ask you, you have to come by. Even if you have gone in for a unit shutdown, you go and buy power from the market and then supply to this DISCOM, who has contracted and is paying you this. But then while this was hailed as something which was quite good, it has led to a lot of challenges as well in the recent past. So what has happened now, the DISCOMs have gone on to the other extreme. And most of the times what they are doing, they are giving very low schedule during the daytime because they have to schedule their. So most of these thermal generating stations are getting scheduled less than the technical minimum during the daytime, but more than the technical minimum during the evening time. So they have to remain on bar, which is during the daytime. So what they are doing, they are over injecting through the unscheduled interchange or deviation settlement mechanism, which is leading to increase in the frequency. Now, this is something which is a phenomenon. Now we are trying to address this issue, and one of the suggestions which has come is as to whether you can bring in, energy price tweaking or the signals through energy pricing of these thermal generating stations. That instead of a flat energy charge for these thermal generating stations all through the day, so you make their energy charge, compatible to the daytime and the evening time. It's a matter of details which you are doing, which could, but then, base load stations, what we call, of course, Mr. Suni would say that the whole concept of base load is undergoing change, but it remains a fact that coal-based generating stations, so their whole cost structuring, their pricing was designed or has been designed with their operation in mind, that they will be flat all through, so their fixed cost as well as the energy charge were fixed. But given the new realities, and more so in the context of the huge intermittent tariff, people are talking in terms of the time of day tariff, even in terms of the energy charge per day, which is what we are also trying to do. But once you have, as Kaveri mentioned, once you have a market, the time of day pricing and the signals out of it will come on their own. Especially the energy only market already are giving you, the pricing signals in terms of reflecting the demand and supply and all that. But again, as I said, I'll again end up by with a caution as to whether energy only market, which gives you enough signals, both possibly for investment and dispatch. I mean, Kaveri put it very nicely. I may have some differences of opinion in terms of the way the CFD scheme was examined. What she, in a nutshell, what possibly she tried to convey is that, dispatch signals is market driven and your investment signal is, in a way, guaranteed through this CFD. Investment part is okay, but dispatch signals, especially in the UK, the kind of CFD that you have for the renewables, the dispatch signals are not market driven in the sense, because it's a zero marginal cost generation. So you will get dispatched under all circumstances. So what is happening is only the, strike price minus it's only the commercial settlement. It's not exactly the dispatch which is being managed by the market price signals, because CFD per se, the real kind of CFD is what is there in your plain vanilla Indian paper written by simple people in India, which is called market-based economic dispatch. Market-based economic dispatch has a CFD mechanism for all kinds of generation, so more so the thermal. CFD that the Western countries or UK understand is only for your renewable, whereas strike price, because there you don't have any kind of signal. MBD actually talked about the CFD, where you said, and where in MBD you have this signal dispatch, which is managed by the signaled by your market, because there we are saying that thermal guys, all thermal generator would get dispatched through the market, and the most efficient one will get dispatched. So if your energy charge is less, you will get dispatched. If your energy charge is high, you will not get dispatched, but you will still have a contract for difference with the buyers with whom you have a kind of a thing. So it's a very innovative kind of thought which is already there in Indian market. Their CFD is completely different, but at least in the energy market, you get those price signals. So, and linked to that is your question around the power purchase agreement as well. Whether the PPA should, I mean, as I said, in fact, given the limited time that you have, I mentioned right at the inception that there is a big debate as to whether we should have only energy only market to give you the right kind of signals for investment and dispatch, or you need a combination of energy only market, capacity market, and ancillary services market. It's not only energy and capacity, you need a separate market for reserves. And whether you need to co-optimize all of these, market-based economic dispatch, our power exchange 7%, these are all energy only market today, where we do not co-optimize the ancillary services and reserves. So the power purchase agreements would have to take the shape of capacity contracts, in my opinion. You would need, in the Indian context, that's again my feeling, which may not be, I mean, which you and others may not agree. But energy only market itself is not sufficient. You would need capacity markets, and capacity markets, especially for flexible resources. As I said, for that peakiest of the peak, you cannot have a base load contracting. You need to contract, but you need to give signals for market investment for these flexible resources to come. And those resources, in my opinion, if contracted with some certainty in terms of recovery of their capacity costs, will be much cheaper than the kind of cost that you as a buyer would end up paying if you have energy only market and energy only market to provide signals for capacities to come to meet your both energy requirement, your peak capacity requirement, as well as your reserves. I'll stop here.
So shall we open the floor for questions?
Thank you. So my question is to Mr. Soni. Thank you, sir, for a very frank and forthright presentation. I agree with you that really the grid is central to whatever happens in the energy transition. Sadly, there's a cost that we have to pay for it. And from the consumer's point of view, when you look at the traditional breakdown of power, bulk power supply cost, transmission used to be an add-on. Today, it's a very significant segment of the bulk supply cost. My question is that, are you satisfied with the manner of regulatory oversight that is being exercised to ensure that the consumer doesn't have to pay more than what she should as far as expansion of the grid and related capacities are concerned? Or would you like to tweak or change the regulatory system under which you operate?
Highly loaded question, sir, but very important. Your specific question is about transmission, and the component of it goes on to the consumer and the regulatory tweaking thereof. So, sir, let me tell you, sir, that CRC has been so agile and so flexible that we are not able to keep track with their changes as far as the transmission regulation is concerned. Massive changes come, and the whole world keeps on asking that, what are you doing with transmission? But one thing is certain, sir, that India has been able to build so much of transmission. Number one. Number two, it's a pangs which all lumpy investments have to go through. We are building transmission for next few generations, and this generation has to pay a bit of a price for it. After a few years, my belief is that transmission will get stabilized because, first of all, it's all other things, depreciation, everything will go down. So The choice as far as the transmission is, there are only two choices in my, very rustic view. Either you get ridiculed now, or you get ridiculed by your next generation. Choice is only yours. You cannot satisfy both. So they are doing correct thing as far as the transmission is concerned. And throughout the world, if you compare, because we keep very close track of what is happening elsewhere in the world, transmission charges are not high in India compared to anywhere else. But the congestion charge, which the other countries go through, is huge. We have to see. The last point I will make on your question, transmission has been understood, greatly understood. That's the tragedy of transmission. Transmission transmits, but transmission also provides you resilience, so far not modeled in any of the models. Transmission cost is actually recovered only in the 5% of the time. Transmission utilization, if it is more than 33%, I get worried as an operator that it's a problem tomorrow. So the transmission is something which has to be understood in view of energy transition. All good things in life, their utilization is single digit, sir. Be it of brain or be it of any good thing. Transmission utilization cannot be compared to generation. And intergeneration sustainability is one issue, big issue. I am not getting into it, but I would say that our central regulator has done yeoman's job as far as the transmission is concerned. And sometimes the complexity is frightening to even people like me who are in the muck, the entire how to handle this. But then look at the thing, you can inject anywhere in the country and drop anywhere in the country. And you have a clean access. So whenever somebody comes from US, I say, hey, give me a transaction between New York and California. I'll give you the screen. Please show me how will you do it. 5 TSOs, they babble between each other, not understanding what is going on. But in India, we can do it. For every 15 minutes, we can buy and sell from anywhere to anywhere, near constraint free. Few generations from now will thank this regime for having built such a good transmission. That's all I would say. But there is always room for improvement. There is no doubt about it. But I would say that what they are doing is exemplary in the world. That's all. Dr. Chatterjee has been giving lectures elsewhere, and because everybody asks him that, how are you doing it? Look, we have created an independent system planner, CTU, devoid of conflict of interest by design. He doesn't have any interest in doing it, number one. Number two, transmission, all the biddings are in private sector. Private sector is bidding. Everything is competitively bid. Second point. Third is the access. What an innovative way of giving access. This whole concept from here to there, source to sink, is a what they call, very hypothetical for market. Electricity doesn't flow like that. It's a fungible commodity. If anything we have to borrow, is to borrow from finance. So that also has been done. Instead of Kirchhoff's current law, we have moved to Kirchhoff's voltage law. That you don't have to tell where you will go. It's a 360-degree thing. So it's a very innovative, sir. And we've got to give some, latitude to them, even if there are something. There will be some hiccups. You can't satisfy everybody. That's true. Thank you. Thank you very much. But very important questions. And this story, this success story, is very poorly documented, badly explained, and we are responsible for it. Yeah, of course, partly Dr. Chatterjee also. We must write well that how, and every aspect has been considered. Fantastic work, I would say. One of the finest work done in the world. Thank you.
Thank you to the panelists.
Sir, could you please introduce yourself, sir?
My name is Vishal. I work in the power team at CEW. And taking a cue from Mr. Tongia, I think another word that I found missing was data in the entire discussion. And perhaps now relating to what Mr. Soni said and what Mr. Chatterjee said, we are trying to do RA planning across states, creating regulations, but giving additional charges to the existing planning cells, as if they are going to be the one to do this. Although it calls for a complete change in culture as to how you plan and do things. And of course, you need IT and technical and skills, people with those skills to do this. Secondly, there is no culture of data sharing between the government and also with like people like us and in this room who can actually play a meaningful role. If there's anything we should be learning from the West, perhaps RA models in Australia are on GitHub, on which the public can download and comment and do many things. And we don't have the data pipelines in place, which allows this interchange of information. Perhaps the FOR should, like I've argued with my colleagues, that FOR should have an additional function where they can lead this exercise where different SERCs are in one room and they try to align their common schemas and formats and reporting requirements, and API sharing as per Government of India policy should be the norm. So these are my reflections. I wish to see your reflections on the data aspect and the challenges.
So can we take one more question then answer?
Yeah, but first, thank you to all the panelists for your views. It's very interesting. I have a fundamental question. Markets do two things. One is the short-term efficiency and the other is long-term efficiency. And as Kaveri pointed out, you do get, you can get short-term efficiency through contracts for differences. And that electricity markets will do well. But when we come to long-term efficiency, that's when people start having trouble. And what Hogan suggests, no government has the stomach to handle those high peak prices that will result and so on. So they have to do. That's why then you have to go to capacity markets to make sure you've got enough capacity. But what my question really is this, the way we've set up our RPOs, that is, we've got not just RPOs, but RPOs for each technology. Is that really consistent with the market? Because you're telling people what they should have, and at the same time you expect people to, the market should really be helping people make that decision.
Yeah, I think I'll just make a quick intervention remarks and then I think leave it to Kaveri and Mr. Suni. First, the question on the data, I think I must concede that whatever you are saying is 100% true. We don't have, as regulators also, I mean, we have been, getting stakeholders come and knock our doors, and we have a big problem of data privacy across all segments, but more so in the power sector. We are trying to engage with, especially the system operator. Mr. Suni has been a system operator himself. So there is a big issue about what data to share, and also the power exchanges at what point of time, what kind of big data. We are, so there is a big demand from various stakeholders and more so from the academicians and researchers for this. And at my personal level, I feel that, yes, this is one area which we need to really work harder on and make as much data publicly available for more research to happen, because it will ultimately, have a feedback loop in terms of enhanced policy making and regulation. So that's a very good intervention that I would say. In terms of the second question on the RPO, but off late, this technology wise from CERC, we have already talked about fungibility, and state regulators also have accepted in terms of the REC, and as well as the Government of India, they also have come up with now RPO, initially now RCO, which is the consumption obligation. There also they have an inbuilt element of, they have some wind and some hydro or DRE. Now they have done that. But if you have a look at the proviso, there is a proviso which talks about the fungibility, that if you have fallen short on one, you can meet by, but so, I mean, idea is that you try and encourage some generation through a separate carve out at its initial phase, but then you still have in the proviso a flexibility of meeting your RPOs through. So there is already a thinking in terms of fungibility over the period. Over to you, yeah, if you have any intervention.
Sure, I can respond to Daljit. I think the question was, should we be technology neutral or technology specific, right? Should we make the decision? And I think a technology neutral instrument would be a carbon tax. Where you or some way in which you cost for the social cost of, but again, determining that social cost is really difficult. And the downside of having a technology neutral instrument would be in carbon, depending on where you price it, some technologies, where you set the subsidy, some technologies may get a windfall profit, some technologies and others may not even get incentivized. So I don't think that, being very, I think the regulators should play a role in deciding which technologies need that extra push and enable that extra push. That's why RE significantly increased in Europe before it did in the US, right? The US was much more focused on technology neutral instruments, whereas in Europe, they were much more focused on technology. They pushed RE, and that helped RE along the in research and development curves.
Wouldn't it be better to give a capital subsidy to specific technologies that you want to encourage, and then let the market decide using carbon taxes or whatever you do? Don't decide the choice at the user level. You can do it through a capital subsidy.
So there's
if you have online, then I can also.
We have online questions.
Yeah.
So we have dozens of questions. Actually.
You've given me the mic, I will ask. A national grid, a national market, but state level regulators. Does this make sense? And I would ask all of you to.
Mine is very clear. 78 at joint service, I read Rajadhya committee report. He said, don't muddle with constitution. It's a union of states, give respect to them. And all the clauses, as Dr. Chatterjee said, are mirror one. You have CRC, SCRC, CTU, STU, SLDC, RLDC, and I think that's something not to be touched for market or for whatever it may be. That's my very straight cut view.
I'd like to add to that very quickly. I think at the states, there's the ability to make change happen, and they understand the context much better than at the center. And so we wouldn't want to lose that, even if some sort of norms or policy changes take longer to happen. They are the people who make change happen, and they understand the context best. So we should give them that ability as well. Is my.
We have quite a few questions online, but out of this, just in continuation.
I think that's
Sure.
one intervention. You can have a perfect national market with absolute freedom for the states and full autonomy for the states in terms of their choices, in terms of their scheduling decisions. So there is no conflict or quarrel between states thriving on their own and at the same time having a national market. So I'll stop here, because if I explain, I'll take a lot of time.
So just one question take on from what carbon markets that you just touched upon, Mary. So the question is from Mr. Harman Singh Anand. Will an emission trading scheme in the power sector in India will be able to impact the merit order towards a cleaner dispatch? And do we think India will be able to manage distributional challenges of an ETS in power sector? So, Suni sir and Kaveri, could you please?
The first, I think marginally, not too much, I would guess. It would have incremental impacts on the merit orders, my initial sense. But I may be wrong. You'll need a model to do this.
So this has been modeled. If you see a report of SCED, the emission baseline given by CA has been superimposed on the variable charges, and again the dispatch has been done. And as rightly mentioned by Madam Kaveri, there's not much of a difference. Of course, there is a slight one, but then you get the plants which are more efficient, better dispatched. That's And we should move in that line is what, regulators should think of.
So one last question before we conclude, because we're already running behind the schedule. One question, that's it.
Am I audible? Yeah. Something that I'm less aware of and would like to know from the panel is, given the green transition and the aim for it, has there been history of better collaboration between the states in India in terms of energy sharing or in terms of technology sharing? And what do you think would be the scope of this going forward? Because some states do perform better than the others. So is collaboration between the states something that we should look for in the future or not?
Well, it's happening. There is no doubt about it. There is a wonderful collaboration. That otherwise we could not have had such a beautiful grid and such a sharing of everything. So I don't think there is any issue on that. As far as the collaboration is concerned, given their local imperatives, they very well collaborate and they learn from each other. A forum of regulators, forum of load dispatchers, forum of transmission utilities, everywhere there is excellent collaboration. No doubt about it.
So,
I mean, before, I don't have any closing remarks, but just if any of our panelists would like to share a last thought, if you would.
So Rahul mentioned risk, that risk hasn't been mentioned. The one thing I like about risk is that it should be divided in a way that the people who can best take risk are the consumers, pay for risk are the consumers, but the people who can manage risk best are the producers. So there's no perfect answer to this, but make sure that this ability is managed, is allowed for through whatever instruments.
So I think we've well short our time, but any good power system or panel should be adaptive and flexible. So with that in mind, I can only just say that we need to have more such conversations. There are many trans-technical issues, and I hope we can continue this conversation throughout. But I want to thank our panelists for very blunt, very focused, but also open-minded that it's a journey. It's not about getting the destination right, but also the processes and the journey. So I think that's one key takeaway I have taken. And I want to thank everyone who joined us, and please stay for some refreshments and we can continue the conversations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.